In the last video we made on Sarah Boone, we stated that it would be our last time covering her, that despite the fact that she's in another entirely separate legal case happening in regards to her ex-husband no longer wanting to pay alimony, and the fact that we knew she would likely take the stand at her sentencing hearing to discuss what she believed was an unfair verdict, we were done. However, we have received tons and tons of comments and emails asking us to reconsider. To say that we were inundated with comments and emails would be an understatement, as someone went so far as to donate an absurd amount of money to Patreon with the expressed hopes that we would cover her again. So, that is what we are doing. Welcome back to another episode of Dreading, or if this is your first time here, welcome. Today we are going to be going over Sarah Boone's sentencing hearing, more specifically, the statement she made to the court prior to being sentenced. This video should be one of our shorter ones, as her statement is less than 30 minutes long, meaning that this video should be shorter than an hour, but knowing us, that might not be the case. Before we begin, if there's a video you would like to see on the channel, or a case you would like to bring more attention to, you can let me know by leaving a comment down below or emailing me at dreading.official@gmail.com. I'm constantly going through a list of your emails, and adding suggestions to the list of stories you want to see. The only times that I've decided to abstain from content is if the victim's family have expressed discomfort with it, or if they have contacted us specifically. New videos are posted every week, with Patreon getting access to the videos as soon as they are completed. So, with all of that said, let us begin. This video is sponsored in part by Surfshark. If you're anything like myself, you're on public Wi-Fi nearly every day. But what you might not know is that using public Wi-Fi puts you directly in hackers' crosshairs, allowing them access to your device and the ability to gain access to your personal private information. Just think for a moment how much data you have on your phone. All your bank records, passwords, addresses, and personal information would be right there, at a stranger's fingertips, and all you did was connect to your local coffee shop's Wi-Fi. That is, unless you're using a VPN like Surfshark. A VPN stands for a virtual private network, which is essentially like wearing an overcoat in a storm. Sure, you could go outside and brave the cold, and do so in your regular clothes, but the coat provides you protection from the weather, while keeping you warm. Surfshark protects your online activity and goes above and beyond to keep your private information private. But that's not all. Surfshark also lets you travel the world from the safety of your own home. Say, for example, my brother and I are researching a case that occurred overseas. With just a few clicks of my mouse, I could change my location to the area in which the crime occurred, and gain access to local articles, and gain detailed information that I otherwise wouldn't have come across. It can also be used to gain access to location-locked content, like if you wanted to watch our video on Prince Andrew, which is currently blocked in the US and Canada. You could use Surfshark to change your location to Australia and immediately gain access. If you're interested in trying Surfshark, now is the best time to try it, as they are currently offering a 30-day money-back guarantee to our subscribers. And if you use our link in the description box down below, you will get an extra 4 months completely free. We cannot emphasize enough how much Surfshark has helped our research, and how much it's helped ease our minds when it comes to cybersecurity. A big thank you to Surfshark for supporting the channel. And with all of that said, let us begin. Before we cover Sarah's statement, it's important to note why convicted criminals have the opportunity to stand in front of the court and speak prior to their sentencing, because it would generally help to understand what Sarah's purpose is here. Throughout the trial, Sarah's attorneys have argued that what happened to George was, in her exact words, not intentional. She hadn't meant to kill him. She would never think to kill him. It was just something that happened, that they were just messing around while drunk, and he got into a suitcase randomly. She laughed at him as he pled for his life while she filmed him. Then she hit him with a bat after he tried to get out, because she apparently had been triggered by past abuse, then left him in there thinking he would have the ability to get himself out. They prompted to put forward a battered spouse defense, saying that despite the fact that she didn't mean to take his life, and actively laughed at him as he was dying, that years of battery at his hands put her in a state of fight or flight, and she left him in the suitcase for her own protection. If you're noticing that those arguments actively contradict each other, then congratulations, you're officially smarter than Sarah. Throughout her letters to the court in the lead up to her trial, Sarah would routinely state that she had a secret defense strategy that was going to prove her innocence in court, that she was going to make the state, the prosecution, the judge, and even the governor of Florida look like idiots for locking up a clearly innocent woman, that she was going to expose a giant conspiracy against her and walk out a free woman. However, as we saw during her trial, there was no secret argument. She said exactly what she'd been saying the entire time, and it led to her being found guilty almost immediately. The issue with Sarah's thinking is that no matter what way you slice it, she killed George. Her actions, whether intentional or not, led to him dying. She knew that because she recorded him begging for his life, and then laughed at him, repeating that this is what he deserved for cheating on her throughout the years. It doesn't matter that she is claiming ignorance once her actions have caught up to her, or that she feels like she isn't responsible, because in the eyes of the law, she absolutely is. That, at the very least, is manslaughter, which is what the state was willing to give her. Prior to the trial, state's attorney informed Sarah's camp that they were willing to charge her with voluntary manslaughter, which would result in, at most, a 15-year prison sentence. She would only have to serve 85% of the term, meaning that in total, she would only be in prison for 12.75 years. And because she had been incarcerated in the lead up to her trial for 4.75 years, she would only have 8 years left on her sentence. She had already wasted taxpayer dollars, dragging the court proceeding out for nearly 5 years, and getting her to take a lesser plea would mean that everyone involved in the case would get some closure, without of course having to sit through a lengthy trial. The Torres family had approved the deal, wanting to lay George to rest without his memory being desecrated on a national scale. Now, most people who had been following the case saw the terms of the deal and thought that it was too good to be offered to Sarah. If you had seen the videos of George in the suitcase, if you had heard the interviews between Sarah and the neighbors, as well as her ex-husband and the Torres family, then the deal was startling. Many people flooded our inboxes to admonish the prosecution because they felt that if she took the deal, justice would not have been done. But she didn't. Sarah saw the deal, had it explained to her by her legal team, and said no. She seemed to feel that she'd been presented with the deal because, and I cannot emphasize this fact enough, the prosecution knew that they were going to fail. She believed that the prosecution was scared of what she would say in court, and how she would expose them for false imprisonment, and offered her the deal in order to keep her silent. That's right, it's the truth that Big Suitcase doesn't want you to know. It had been reported that despite her attorney begging Sarah to take the plea deal to let the matter rest and telling her that there was no way she was going to be found completely innocent, that she truly felt that when the case rested, the jury would be on her side. They would think that she had done no wrong and release her. Her letters discussed her writing a book about her life, specifically about what had happened to her, and how she would skyrocket to international fame. But that didn't happen. It turns out Sarah's narcissistic delusions didn't actually lead to her success, and she was convicted of murder in the second degree. Everybody besides Sarah knew this verdict was coming, based on everything that was put forward in the case. But try to put yourself in Sarah's shoes. Throughout this case, anytime she feels like someone isn't favoring her, she will accuse them of being a part of a grander conspiracy against her, that she's being unfairly penalized, and the entire state of Florida's justice system has been perverted in order to make money off of her. And while that is obviously untrue, it shows her state of mind and her general comprehension. If she doesn't like a law or a policy, it is attacking her. It is aggressing upon her specifically. When the original judge came to obvious conclusions about this case, when she was told that she couldn't make certain arguments by her former attorneys, when channels like our own reported on her antics, the way we have done for multiple other accused criminals awaiting trial, Sarah genuinely believed that we were all in bed with each other, conspiring to make her case unwinnable and make as much money as possible. And look what happened. She didn't win. Sarah's already prepared herself for losing the case, because that would feed her delusion. No matter what the outcome of the trial, Sarah was prepared to contort it into her worldview and make it mean something that it didn't. Of course, she wanted to be found innocent and walk out of court a free woman, but she spent years telling the public that the entire justice system was dead set on wrongfully convicting her, and this is what she believed happened. This speech will be less of a contrite confession and plea for the court to give her a lighter sentence, but a sort of victory lap. She has ignored all the advice her lawyers have given her thus far, and will be taking this moment in the spotlight to say what she really feels in the moment. This is not our first time watching this footage, as we were present in a live stream when it occurred. So, let us review. To be clear, we are less than 30 seconds into her time on the stand, but this right here is when we knew that she would not be pleading with the court for a shorter sentence. She is actively smirking at the crowd that has assembled in the courtroom, seemingly very excited to get into her speech, which is extremely inappropriate for this scenario. While we haven't covered many sentencing hearings, we do watch all that have been made public as part of our research into cases, and while the sincerity of the defendant is always questionable, they at least make an attempt to come across as contrite and sympathetic to the court. They understand that they have just been found guilty, that there is no way that they are reasonably going to avoid jail time, so their ultimate goal is to appear like they accept responsibility for their actions, and understand that they put themselves in this position. A great example is when Willard Miller spoke at his sentencing hearing after being found guilty of murdering his Spanish teacher, Noema Graber. The statement that he wrote out hit all the key points it was supposed to. He apologized for his actions, he accepted his role in the murder, and he addressed the people who were impacted most in the case. However, he shifted between smirking throughout the statement, as if killing his teacher over a poor grade was funny, and being completely monotone and robotic. Despite the words on the page being right, he didn't really care. But Sarah isn't even going to go that far. This is the first and really only time she will be saying whatever she wants on the stand. Every other time, she has had to abide by the court's rules and a lawyer's guidance, but now she's completely cut loose. Wu-Tang. So let's see what happens.
For the record, just state your name again.
Sarah Boone.
All right. Now, this is unlike a trial, so you're allowed to speak in a narrative form, as well as I understand you have taken some notes or written a letter that you want to read from, and then you want to speak to the court after that.
Yes.
All right. Why don't you go ahead and get started?
This is actually an edited version of.
Hold on a second.
So, Sarah is annoyed. Everything is already starting on a great foot here. She doesn't like that the microphone is being adjusted. She doesn't like that she's being told once again what to do. And it's likely that she's also annoyed that she had to edit down her thoughts and feelings at all, which makes sense if you remember that Sarah has repeatedly stated that she has been silenced throughout her incarceration. In her letters, she has repeated that her voice has been stifled and shut down by her lawyers and the court at large. They won't let her say and do what she wants, and she was sure that that was because they were conspiring against her. Somehow, the justice system in Florida found out that Sarah had gotten straight A's in high school and felt that she needed to be taken down a peg or two by pinning George's murder on her. She was just too good of a mom, too good of a wife, and a high school student over 2 decades earlier. Despite the fact that Sarah has said and done largely whatever she wanted, even writing a massive manifesto about her case, which we have covered, she wants the freedom to act without consequence. She doesn't want to edit herself down, or be given general guidelines in which to abide by in a court of law.
I had a lot to say. I've had a lot of time to think about things, and I didn't really know how to put it on paper. And I didn't know how much I could say or how little I should say. So what I have here is, like I said, an edited version. But I would like to read the more important parts that I feel that everyone should know that wasn't said in my actual trial.
Based solely on what Sarah just said, I would venture to guess that in the next few months, we will be hearing from her again. I don't mean my brother and I mean a general we, as in the public. Because of the coverage this case has gotten, I have no doubt that Sarah has been contacted by multiple media outlets who have probably offered her a chance to say whatever she wants. And while she turned those offers down while awaiting trial, going so far as to admonish the reporters for even asking for those interviews in her letters, she'll probably take those interviews now that she has nothing left to lose. I also want to state here that it's extremely apparent that Sarah is going to claim that she was given insufficient counsel. Sarah's attorney already filed a motion to dismiss the verdict, listing out multiple reasons why she wasn't given a fair trial. One of those reasons was the fact that the judge told her she would have to represent herself mere months before the trial began due to her antics. However, this point was discounted by the fact that she did have representation in the form of an entire legal team who handled the case pro bono. We've been clear in our coverage that the legal team that she was provided were not given a significant amount of time to create their arguments, which definitely did hurt her chances. However, that was her own doing. She can't complain about the situation when the judge repeatedly reminded her that was going to happen if she continued to cause issues with her lawyers. That motion was dismissed, but there's really nothing stopping her from continuing to claim insufficient counsel until she's blue in the face.
And on top of what I have on paper, this is just the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg. So I wanted to read this, and then if I may, I would like to address everyone in my apology on top of my statement.
So Sarah will be apologizing. Keep that in the back of your mind as she is speaking. Most notably, though, Sarah is once again back to stating that everything that the public knows about this case is just the tip of the iceberg, that the public isn't fully apprised of all the facts of what went on between George and herself, and how this case was handled, which is just incorrect. We've watched this case since it began, and the vast majority of the information we've gotten from it has come directly from the Orange County Clerk website itself. Everything from interviews with Sarah's husband, her landlord, her neighbors, and friends have all been made public. All the body cam footage from everyone who arrived the morning after the murders was just released. All the letters she has written from prison and so much more is publicly available, and anyone who wants them is free to access them. We've seen the videos that she took of George as he lay dying in the suitcase. We heard the 911 call that she made after calling her ex-husband, and more. The public knows what happened. We've seen what happened, and there is no new information that could come out about this case that could validate what she did. This isn't the tip of the iceberg. This is the whole thing. But because Sarah delusionally believes that she is in the right, that most rational people would agree with her if they were made aware of what happened, she has to create an excuse as to why people don't. It can't just be that she's in the wrong and is the one at fault here. It has to be that we don't really know what happened. In the lead up to the trial, Sarah overhyped her defense. For nearly 5 years, she sent letters to the court saying that there was so much more that she could say, that when she got a chance to say what she wanted in front of the court, we would all regret how we treated her, and more. But she never said anything that changed our minds. Everything that she made reference to were things we were already aware of, and it would make no sense for her to keep any further information to herself. She was on trial for murder, and if she lost, she could spend the rest of her life in prison. I genuinely don't understand that with her whole life on the line, why she would still choose to withhold evidence that would exonerate her, that she just randomly decided to not follow through with what she'd been saying for the past 4 years, and of course that it was the courts who silenced her, and not the lack of any real evidence that would justify her murder. None of that makes sense, especially because we watched her testimony. She definitely put forward her own version of events with minimal interruption from the court. At some point, you have to realize that people are not going to agree with you, that if the vast majority of people feel like you are in the wrong, that maybe you actually are, or at the very least, maybe not everyone is going to see things the way that you do.
You may proceed, ma'am.
Kintsugi is a kind of Japanese ceramic style which means to repair with gold. In this tradition, when a ceramic piece breaks, an artisan will fuse the pieces back together again using liquid gold or gold dust lacquer. So rather than being covered up, the breaks become more obvious and a brilliant new piece of art emerges from the brokenness. It embraces flaws, weakness, and imperfections, and also teaches the essence of resilience. Every crack in a ceramic piece is a part of its history, and each piece becomes more beautiful because it has been broken. This is the wisdom of kintsugi. In my wisdom, and with all of my repairs, then, now, and ongoing, God is, has been, and will always be my artisan. All of my gold is forgiveness. This has held me together, made me shine brighter, and overcome the damage caused by George Torres, the Torres family, the justice system, Orange County Corrections Department, social media, scoundrel detectives, infamy, defamation, ongoing constitutional rights violations, second-degree murder, forced into being pro se.
And there we go. If you have watched any of our coverage of Sarah Boone's letters, then you are no doubt aware of the fact that she is a big fan of metaphors. There is nothing she likes more than conveying how she is thinking and feeling about a subject through a comparison that she had to Google, or use dictionary definitions in order to communicate her points. Usually, they are extremely clunky and are meant to showcase that she's being victimized in some way, and this is no different. In earlier letters, Sarah, of course, compares herself to famous martyrs, said she is on a holy quest, and requested that the judge pick up his sword and fight alongside her for justice for all. But now she's comparing her situation to a culturally significant practice that she Googled once in prison. She is further using this metaphor to showcase how she, as she always said, is being railroaded by the justice system and being treated unfairly because she disagrees that she killed George, but doing it under the guise of taking the high road because she forgives them. Because she fundamentally disagrees with the idea that she is the reason that George died, she lists all the groups of people who have wrongfully attacked her by saying she forgives them. This included the man that she killed, his family, who she has sent blatantly racist attacks to, the entire justice system, the Orange County Corrections Department, social media, so all of you watching who have had opinions about the case and voiced them, scoundrel detectives, and forced by the judge into being pro se. She also lists general concepts like infamy, defamation, and second-degree murder. Sarah is, of course, speaking down to everyone, because we clearly are too stupid to see the facts of this case. Because we disagreed with her on the foundation of this case, that being the question of if she is responsible for killing George, she thinks that we are beneath her, that we are either sheeple who cannot think for themselves and see past what the police and prosecution have put forward, or jealous idiots, who simply cannot understand that she made one mistake and shouldn't be penalized for that. She is shaming the world at large for their interpretation of her actions, but doing so in the most condescending manner possible. If you've ever worked in the service industry and dealt with a passive-aggressive customer who believes that you are in the wrong for following your company's policy and not giving them special treatment, you've likely encountered someone who felt compelled to speak to you in this manner. They are so sure that they are in the right that they will make a show of it, and it's frustrating to behold because it's so obviously forced. Sarah is angry. She's been angry since she was arrested because she doesn't believe she did anything wrong. Sure, she recorded George, but she contends that if he fought hard enough, he could have gotten himself out of the case, and it's not her fault that he didn't. That yes, she recorded herself mocking him, showing malice and flat out refusing to help when he was in a life-threatening situation, but that she is a good person who got good grades in high school. She believes that we should have looked at the situation and determined that on some level, George deserved it. And also, she is a good person. And also, just let her go. So, she's pissed that we didn't. But she doesn't want to say that she's pissed outright, because that's not what a good person would do. That is her unyielding belief throughout this entire endeavor. So the only way she can show her frustration is through condescension.
Just as gold is very precious, forgiveness is invaluable. Forgiveness is not an attempt to change or forget who, what, or how you've lived through to be so gold, but an act of grace, humility, and considerable self-compassion to be set free from sorrow. Withholding forgiveness denies your brilliance and adds even greater grief and deeper heartache, irreparable cracks on top of the already that no one deserves, no matter the pain or disappointment, untruths or injustice. It doesn't matter, as the more broken you are, even though now different than before, you've become more outstanding and more extraordinary. Above all, when you let go of blame, misunderstandings, excuses, give up your anger and cease from resentment, this is forgiven. And when you forgive, you heal. And when you heal, you move forward.
To be clear, Sarah has just spent the last minute complimenting herself to the court. She's about to be sentenced for murder, and she has told the court about what a truly wonderful person she is, which is so inappropriate that the first time we watched it, we were truly shocked. We've read every letter Sarah has sent, watched all of her interviews and court appearances at least 10 times in preparation for our videos, and yet she still found a way to shock us.
My goal begins with George Torres, and every time he slapped me, kicked, punched, spit on, raped, stabbed, choked, laughed at, pushed, pulled, dragged, whipped, tripped, stole from, lied, terrorized, threatened, humiliated, forced, degraded, made me cry. Every time he tried to end me, defeat, or destroy. I forgive George for beating me senseless, for trying to sleep because I had to go to work or my son's field trip the next day, for ruining my deceased family's heirlooms, traditions, and keepsakes, my son's furniture, destroying the television we watched together, for wrecking our townhome by breaking windows, punching holes in the walls and doors, ramming his entire body into glass doors, kicking in my front and back door over and over and over, for breaking or removing the locks from all of the doors and sometimes the knobs altogether, so I had nowhere to feel safe, including the sacred space of my son's room where he beat me bloody on his bed. For terrorizing and threatening my blind and deaf dogs by leaving the gate open I built to keep them safe, telling me he hoped I'd find their bloated dead body in the pond or scrape their remains off of the pavement, for kicking them off of the bed and throwing across the room because they were trying to protect me. For threatening to make me unrecognizable to my son by breaking all of the bones in my face, like his brother Moses did to him after he kept seeing all of the bruises from George beating me, like all of the times their father beat their mother. For all of the drunken rages and fist fights with so many neighbors when wandering into their apartments during hunting expeditions after I had escaped. For drowning me in liquor and wine because I didn't want to drink, causing me to urinate on myself, then butting the end of the bottle in my face, giving me 2 black eyes and a bloody nose. For making me experience what it is to be sodomized. Threatening to kill my friends and the neighbors when they checked on me to make sure I was alive and in one piece. For threatening to burn down our townhome and set my car on fire because I got a job. For holding me hostage on weekends my son was supposed to come over by keeping my keys around his neck, my phone in his crotch, and a butcher knife stuck in the middle of the table as a warning not to ask anything or try to leave. for stabbing me in the leg and not letting me call 911 for an ambulance or seek help, where I nearly bled to death until I concocted a lie to save him from being arrested. For destroying my phone with a hammer because my son called. For me experiencing ever being arrested and after today, prison.
We've covered George's abuse of Sarah extensively because it's key to this case, but I ask you, what is the purpose of putting these examples of abuse forward in this context? Why would she spend her time detailing what should be the most horrific moments of her life when she's supposed to be asking for leniency from the court, as well as taking responsibility for her actions and saying she's sorry? In our opinion, Sarah brings these moments up in order to posit that when she locked George in the suitcase, when she mocked him and told him he deserved to die, that she was correct to do so, that her actions were justified and the courts should have seen them as such. The issue is that it goes against what she said on the 911 call, what she said to the police at the scene, and what she said in her police interview. Initially, she stated that the two were drinking, and George got into the suitcase while playing hide-and-seek. Then she left him in the bag overnight by accident, that she thought he could get out the entire time, and was shocked when she found him the next day. She only changed her story when the police made her aware of the fact that she had taken 2 videos on her phone, which showed at the very least she was aware that George was dying when she left him in the bag. Sarah actively dismantled her own defense through her antics, by repeatedly saying contradictory things leading up to the trial. Because she has shown that she is in the habit of saying whatever will benefit her at the time, she would switch her defenses and flip-flop between stating that she kept George in the suitcase for her own protection, then stating that she was simply drunk and forgot about him. Those obviously cannot be true at the same time. It would make sense, therefore, for people to not believe or trust her when she describes her experience with George, which you have likely seen in the comment sections of any video discussing the case. And though it is our belief that George did abuse Sarah based on the evidence, there is also evidence that supports that she abused him as well. Many of the claims she has made against George have been contested by other parties, who claim that her version of events do not line up with what they saw firsthand. Sarah is trying to shame the court by describing what George did to her, so they will feel compelled to give her a lighter sentence, but listing what she has been through in this manner is less than effective. Because she is trying to frame her testimony through the lens of her forgiving George, listing out every event comes across as extremely callous, since this is the man whose life she took. It's not her forgiving him, it's her trying to desecrate him in his memory. Her framing is manipulative, and therefore hard to get behind, even if you believe that he had harmed her throughout their relationship.
For beating me almost blind, crushing my occipital lobe. For having me experience what it means to see stars, like in the cartoons, where a character has a tall lump on their head. I had that too, and many times. For dragging me downstairs by my hair in the middle of the night just to sit next to him. For taking my car driving drunk with my debit card to buy more alcohol while I slept, even after I cunningly explained the importance of my car to take my son to school foremost, me to work, and he to his batterers intervention classes and probation officer meetings, where I would be forced to sit for hours in the parking lot waiting for him. For causing me so much trauma and pain, mentally, physically, emotionally, I had to be hospitalized more than once. For destroying my reputation and integrity, for my M for murderer scarlet letter, not letting me feel safe to live, talk to other people, spend time with my son, have a job, friendships, simply go to the bathroom with the door closed, or go to sleep soundly or comfortably. I forgive George for lying, for him trying in so many ways, so many times, to end me with his terrifying love. I also forgive the Torres family, his mother and father foremost, also his 2 ex-wives and daughters, all for knowing who George was, capable of, and has done in the past, his history of violence and where he learned it, than to keep turning a blind eye when I would ask for help.
Now, this is inappropriate. Regardless of what you feel about George, specifically using your time on the stand to air out his family is exceedingly gross and unjustified. They lost their son, sibling, and father. They were forced to wait nearly 5 years to see any justice for his murder, and had to deal with thousands of strangers commenting on their lives. And Sarah is now opening them up for more. She is trying to push the blame for what happened onto them, saying that while she wasn't responsible for the actions that directly led to George's death, that they were, that they didn't protect her enough, and then using the intimate details of their lives as evidence of that. To say that she is out of line is an understatement, because there is no person who would see her doing this and feel as if it were justified to single them out this way. They are the family of the person she killed, and they don't deserve this.
All of his siblings, including Torres, who is now on his way to prison for stabbing the mother of their baby in the side of her head. For everyone who knew what George was doing to me, sometimes how and when, but allowed and enabled. I forgive them for caring too late. I hope they all ask themselves while quiet and comfortable in bed at night the uneasy question, what could I have done to stop this from happening to both of them? And after all the times Sarah tried to, by asking for help from all of us and so many times. Another great contributor of my gold is social media, with its greed, insensitivity, deception, obvious exploitation, and advantageous gain from my criminal case as a whole, and for sentencing me by anticipation as a result of ignorance and hate.
So now all of us, you the viewer and me, the person making the video, are singled out and given Sarah's gold, as she calls it. She reiterates the fact that it is our fault that she was incarcerated, and now is going to prison for the rest of her life. That had it not been for content creators like myself and my brother, that people would look at the case with softer eyes. That somehow we poisoned the well against her, even though that is not the case. The men and women selected for the jury were not aware of the case details or the coverage that we provided. In jury selection, any person who would have been asked if they knew Sarah, seen coverage of her case, or even tangentially heard of the case where a woman locked her boyfriend in a suitcase, would have been disqualified outright. So the idea that we made it impossible for her to persevere is blatantly untrue. But she has repeatedly stated that everyone who has been less than sympathetic towards her has done so in order to destroy her reputation. We saw a smart, brilliant young mother who was caught up in a series of unfortunate events and made it our mission to take her down a peg. We were just so jealous of her because how dare she seem to have it all figured out, which is obviously not true. Most people were made aware of this case through impartial coverage, where the details were read out plainly and then came to their own conclusions. Moreover, the details of this case don't necessarily warrant thoughtful reflection, because it's incredibly cut and dry. Even if you were to give Sarah the benefit of the doubt, with whatever version of events she wants you to believe at that moment, her actions still caused George's death, which at the very least is manslaughter. Her actions resulted in someone's death, which is a crime. There's not much more that needs to be said.
Conjured and fabricated by the organized crime that is social media, which condemned me in the court of global public opinion since the beginning. My family law case is the new prey waiting to be picked apart and pillaged from me being made infamous by social media in my criminal case. It simply seems I cannot forgive and be forgiven and move forward.
So, we've already established that we had no intention of covering her family law case. As neither my brother or I are lawyers, we cannot access any of the information from that case as far as we are aware, and don't particularly relish doing more research into her. That said, it has been heavily requested from our Patreon supporters, so if we were to do it, we would post it here. But how Sarah frames this, once again, is completely distorted. Sarah reopened that case, having already had her legal case covered heavily. She was well aware that a new case would gain public attention, but she thought that the majority of people would be on her side, that they would condemn her ex-husband for his refusal to pay alimony while she was in prison and support her. And she was wrong, like she has been throughout everything for the last 5 years. Instead of learning anything from her time in prison, Sarah has continued to do the same things over and over again, only to act shocked when she gets the same response. It's never her actions causing a reaction. It's always someone attacking her for no reason. Moreover, Sarah has not forgiven anyone and moved on at any point in this case. Even now, she is sitting on the stand, airing out every single one of her grievances, because she has not forgiven any of the people who she believes wronged her. We're not saying that she needs to, but she is, and she hasn't.
Social media has made me a pariah. It has caused great oppression and undeniable disadvantages, especially by broadcasting and manipulating my cases online. In my criminal case, as a result, my opportunities to be given a fair, proper, and uninfluenced, successful conclusion was heavily depleted and poisoned. I forgive them. Also, all of the media tycoons for not having a life of their own, trying so desperately to make themselves seem so right by making me appear so wrong. Forgiveness for prejudgment, ridiculous theatrics, lies, making and taking blood money from my and others' misfortunes, accidents, and catastrophes. It's all over their hands and their keyboards. And even after all that's been said and done, theorized, hypothesized, scrutinized, and blasphemed in my case, still no one knows me. In the end, I forgive myself for not choosing my life sooner, for not being more brave, vigilant, bolder, and outspoken, stronger, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, for being hopeless, desperate, simple-minded, weak, and inexperienced. I forgive myself for not realizing I was enduring a life of domestic violence and that the vicious cycle of never ends. I had nothing to compare to. I've never been hit by a man ever before in my life. I was raised hitting a woman was wrong and should never happen. No excuse.
Pausing to point out that this actually goes against many of the public claims she has made against her ex-husband. Since he refused to pay alimony while she was in prison, she has alleged that he was also abusive towards her, though not to the same degree as George.
I forgive myself for not escaping permanently, for not fighting back sooner to save myself, my son, my dogs, home and car. Having 20/20 hindsight, thinking of everything I could have done differently or better to avoid the outcome. I think about this every day since. Also, of all the good days we had together, for him at least, while I was constantly in hyperdrive, high alert, and paranoid, making sure I did everything right all the time. If not, the great possibility I would be ended as George threatened me with so many times before. I forgive myself for falling in love with a monster, and no matter how grotesque he may become, I still loved him, hoped, and forgave. I tried breaking the spell so he wouldn't be a monster anymore. I saw who he was inside. George made me then, now, and always love him for all of his cracks also. We made each other our own brilliant pieces of art from the cracks and repairs. Unfortunately, not all cracks can be. In all of my forgiveness, George is my greatest lesson and will forever be a part of me. I think of him every day and still speak to him when alone on the rec yard. I ask his forgiveness and that he looks for me at the gates of heaven so I can tell him how sorry I am, endlessly, and that I never stopped loving him. In all of it and still. When I first came to jail, I put my mat under my bed and cried all day and all night for months, only falling asleep from being so exhausted with grief. I wrote him letters. I wrote his family and his daughters, apologizing for asking for their forgiveness. But due to fear that my life or sons would be jeopardized, I did not send. I am sorry. I cannot begin to fathom any of their grief and sadness. Please forgive me. Almost everything reminds me of him, seeing my stab wound especially every day especially. It truly reminds me that all I really did live through. George haunts me. He is everywhere. I believe because I do still love him, think of him, and miss his laugh the most. In my heart, I know he is with me and understands that this tragedy was not intentional. I hope everyone can, his family foremost. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please wholeheartedly know that, and always, I would never. Forgive me, George. Forgive me, Torres family. Forgive me, Judge Cranick. To the entire planet, please forgive me.
So, if that last portion was all she said, she would have been better off. But her asking for forgiveness, after scornfully stating that she forgives them, comes across as extremely disingenuous. You can't ask for forgiveness after telling someone else that they should be begging you for it, since they are so beneath you.
I graciously and humbly ask for consideration, for forgiveness to be extended instead of judgment, for reconciliation and restoration for all of us to move forward. My apology is profuse and ceaseless. Allow me, please, to brush off the muck, wipe the blood off of my face, and fix the cuts in my skin. I ask for understanding in what really happened and for how long, for second chances, repentance, and redemption, to advocate for all domestic violence survivors, to help them overcome, heal, and still hope, always, to make their voices heard, to confidently walk with all of their scars on the outside and the inside, to help them not ever become a casualty of domestic violence as so many others, to stop the abuse and maltreatment before it's too late. There is always hope, and you can survive.
This would be a noble undertaking if there were any evidence that in the past 4 years in prison, she actually did anything to show that this really was a passion of hers. Advocacy is not an easy thing to do, especially while in prison, but it is possible. One example is Kip Kinkle, a school shooter who spent his time in prison doing absolutely incredible work. We've seen a few examples of former victims going on to try and enact positive change, and as someone who is unfortunately an expert on how Sarah spent the past few years, she has not done so. The only changes she has tried to put forward have been for her own benefit, so the very idea that she would now become an advocate for others is hard to believe.
In my soft-spoken conclusion, I ask this. Would I be the darling mother, celebrated woman of the year, if it were I who died?
Okay, no. It's been less than 10 seconds since we unpaused, but we need to head her off at the pass here because this is a ridiculous argument. Sarah absolutely would not have been remembered as a great mother, loving wife, or soft-spoken person had she been killed at George's hands. Though she would have been remembered more fondly, most of her neighbors, her ex-husband, and those who were forced to be in her presence would not have talked about her kindly, because she is not a kind person. She was an aggressive, loud drunk. She would also routinely verbally assault those who came into contact with her. From her landlord to the other parents at her son's school, she also refused to take care of her child, endangering his life countless times because she prioritized drinking over him, and she seemed to be the only person to hold herself in any esteem. Although it's unlikely people would have been as forthright about their experiences with her if she had died, they would not have described her the way she describes herself, because she was never that way.
How many daughters, mothers, sisters, aunts, grandmothers, nieces, and friends have been because they did? I am a survivor. Learn to do good, seek justice, rebuke oppressors, defend the fatherless, plead for the widow. Isaiah 1:17, all-encompassing, protect the abused.
Ms. Boone, is that the end of your written statement?
Yes.
Now, gathering your thoughts, did you want to make an oral statement?
I do.
All right, would you do that now?
Yes, please. My statement, my verbal statement is primarily to the Torres family, to the judge, to his daughters. I know you all know who I really am and that I did care for George and that I do still love George. I know you know that we had very many good days. And I take offense to the statement of being said that this is just for a moment. Right now with me here in the courtroom in front of you all, this is just for a moment. But the moments before that, in order for me to be here, is endless. It's everlasting. The scars that I have on the inside, my outside scars have healed, except for my stab wound. But this has changed me as a person to see things differently and to understand things differently and to not be weak and just try to protect yourself and forever, regardless of the time that I may receive from today, I forever will have this experience. I forever will have George Torres with me in my heart, in my mind, my body, and my soul. As he and I used to say that we were one soul split into two bodies. This is not just for a moment. It may be for everyone in this courtroom, but when I leave, this is forever. When you all leave, that this is forever. This is forever.
I think this is going to be forever. I'm sorry. It's wild that she isn't taking the time to further apologize or try to come across as more sincere. She's responding to someone else's statement because she doesn't like the implication that she wants attention, which, I mean, she does. Conclusively, she does, because why are we still here? She just has an issue with how the attention manifested. Moreover, I don't know why she is making this statement to the judge as well. She said that these words are for the Torres family and the judge. But why would Judge Cranick know that George and her had good days? So they're just somewhere on the beach holding hands and there's Judge Cranick judging. Ugh. Okay, anyways, it's shocking how bad of a job she has done here. Knowing everything we know, I'm still awestruck.
For everyone here and those who it matters to most, I am one of those who will experience this forever. I'm sorry. Words do not define my shame, and I don't know what else it is that I can say and convey to the Torres family how this happened. The ifs and whys and how really don't matter. It happened, and I'm sorry. Words cannot describe. And I hope that everyone can forgive me, the Torres family most of all, and his daughters, because I know what he meant to them. And I don't think that anybody ever understood what he meant to me and I to him. And I ask for forgiveness.
Ms. Boone, I have just one or two questions, if you don't mind. And you can speak on it if you want or not. But this is a unique case, and one of the reasons it's so unique is that you were in jail for 4.5 years prior to your trial. And I understand that when you were brought up as a child that you did have some spirituality in your family, some church, some religion.
Always.
But I understand that you got away from that. Did you have a chance during the 4.5 years to look back at your spirituality?
Absolutely. You know, everyone supposes that this is one of the worst experiences of my life, and it's actually been one of my greatest. If I were not beaten to death, I was going to work myself to death on the outside, and I never had time to get back into my Bible and to pray and to be with the Lord. And I, being here incarcerated, have had time, of course, to get closer to God, to reacquaint myself to Him and realize what it's all about. This is all temporary, and when I say temporary, I don't mean by being set free in jail or from prison or wherever else. It means being set free and temporary, meaning that you work for something higher, you work for God, that you strive for your crown to be placed upon your head by Jesus Christ by being said, "You have done well, my good and faithful servant." I've always tried to be a good and faithful servant. I was just a servant as opposed to doing all that I can when my family were alive and I was going through everything up to this point. I've become so much more closer to the Lord, and it's made me such a better person, and I hope that I am an example going forward of the Lord's light and can draw many people to me because of it.
Thank you.
Any follow-up, State?
No, I assumed that was the final word.
Thank you. She can return back to council's table.
So Sarah feels as if she did a good job here. She said everything she needed to say, in the precise way that she needed to say it, meaning that the judge would likely decide to be a bit more lenient when it came time to sentence her. But, like every other thing she had ever predicted, she was wrong. Judge Michael Kranick sentenced her to life in prison, and will never spend another day as a free woman. If you've made it to this portion in the video, let me know what you think of her sentence in the comments down below. Do you think it's fair, or do you feel as if Judge Kranick was way too hard on her? What did you make of her statement in court? Your opinion is always welcome, and we can't wait to read through them. With that in mind, if there's any video you would like to see made, including other ones on Sarah, let us know in the comments down below or by emailing me at dreading.official@gmail.com. Have a great day, and remember, stay safe.